Well, I guess it's that time of the year again already.
Another year not in a coffin, growing up or whatever you call it. Sometimes you get what you got, but it's not what you wanted at all. This is not another Christmas.
Santa! No, the fuck it's not! As I've done every year since 2018, I've always finished the year off with the best and worst albums list, always starting off with the worst. This is a video that I don't particularly like making because, well, I'm talking about the albums I listened to this year that I didn't like. Some of them were disappointing, and others were just absolute shit. And for the most part, like 2021 and 2022, this is more a year of disappointments than dislike, because when we look at the 5 albums that I'm going to be talking about, I have liked these bands at one point in time, but now they just kind of seem stale in a way to where they can't make a great record anymore, or maybe some of them are starting to tail off into that territory of, oh, maybe they won't ever be able to make a great album again. That it's just kind of disappointing. What are these 5 albums, you might be asking? Well, I'm about to kick off the list right here for you at number 5. Number 5. It's funny because Pvris isn't even a band anymore. Lynn Gunn is just kind of taking the Brendan Urie route and using that name because, I guess, reasons? I don't know. Like, nothing against Lynn Gunn, but your ideas just seem stale at this point. Like, at least with the first 2 Pvris albums and even a little bit on the third one, you got some sense of urgency there. But with this, they all just sound like generic pop hits that aren't really all that great because, like, we've heard them done better from other artists before. I just feel like there's way too much talent with Lynn that I should be getting more from it than what we're getting now. I mean, this is probably the first Pvris album I listened to where I don't enjoy anything. I don't go back to anything on this album because there's really not anything to go back to. It's just sad saying that because when I first heard them, they wowed me with the way they were able to mix pop and rock and synth together, but now it's just all turned into a cluster that is slowly turning into like a, Panic at the Disco type situation.
Ian, can you hand me that?
The baguette?
What'd you just call me?
I asked if you wanted the baguette.
It's pronounced baguette.
What
it's French!
Number 4. All Time Low, you won me back with Wake Up Sunshine, and now I'm just asking you this question. What the hell were you doing with this album?
I know it's better if we both say so long and thanks for the memories. I'd like to say that it's not...
Like, seriously, their first go-around with Fueled by Ramen, Last Young Renegade didn't go too well, but I felt like they're too good of a band that they're not, they're not going to rebound from, the next release. And when they released Wake Up Sunshine in 2020, it was a treat. Even though it still had some, more pop-leading elements, it felt like All Time Low, whereas Last Young Renegade didn't. With this new album that we have here from them called Tell Me I'm Alive, it takes all the bad pop elements that they've been doing and just continuing to beat that into the ground, and I just don't understand why they just went back to doing that. Not to say that they can't, like, literally they can do whatever they want, but Wake Up Sunshine was such a nice return to form that I feel like just kind of taking it all back with this thing, it just felt like with Wake Up Sunshine you wanted to make that album that would win people back and then be like, alright, that's it, we're going back to doing shit. Like, they have Avril Lavigne on this album and it's like cool, but like maybe 20 years too late because just last year Avril Lavigne released a shit comeback pop punk album and now they're collabing with her. I think Jelly Roll was on this record and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on here? Why is this album so all over the place when the last album was just so, it was listenable, it was cohesive, you had ideas that you wanted to put together that worked so well, and now this whole thing just kind of feels like, oh, this is what we had in Wake Up Sunshine that didn't make the cut, and it's clear why they didn't make the cut, because they just aren't as good. Number 3. You can hate on Kiss all you want, and this is coming from, a Kiss fan, You can't see the whole tattoo. I'm sorry, there you go. They have made some albums over the years that, haven't been pleasant. Some people would say they've never made a good album, but hey, you gotta listen to the classics to really appreciate what they were able to do. But at least there was a point in their career where they were like, no one wants to hear new music from us anymore. We're just going to continue doing the Kiss thing and the makeup with the stage presence, singing the classics that everyone loves. Nobody wants to hear new songs. Some bands need to start following that trajectory because, man, we have a lot of them out there that are still kicking that probably shouldn't be. And when I say that, there's bands that are making albums that probably shouldn't make albums anymore. And Metallica is definitely one of them. Don't get me wrong, love Metallica, always will, but at this point in time, who's clamoring for a new album from them? Like, nobody at this point. There's a reason that it's taken them, 8 years and 7 years in between the past couple of records that they put out after Saint Anger, just because, I feel like after Saint Anger is when they lost their creative sensibility, and they were just kind of like, we still need to piss records out because, Metallica, we're gonna sell. But at the same point in time, they just haven't really done anything on the past 3 records, past Saint Anger, that has been interesting enough to make me go, oh, they still got it. They still have these long, overbloated songs that shouldn't be anywhere close to 8 or 9 minutes long. Heck, the shortest song on here, Lux Eterna, is 3.5 minutes, and that is a banger, but then you get to the rest of the album, and it just all meshes together and becomes boring because it all sounds the same, and you're like, why are you still doing this? Nobody's going to want to come to a concert and hear these songs. They want to hear the classics. Nobody wants new album from you anymore because we know what we're going to get every single time, and that's the problem with these legacy bands, is that they get so caught up with, oh, okay, this is what people like and whatnot, so that's what we have to keep doing, when they don't realize it just makes them stale later down the line because, alright, you've released the same thing the past 5, 6 records. It's okay to change it up. It's okay to do something different. It might piss off the old fans, but at the same point in time, it would give something new to the ear for us to hear rather than the same bullshit 100 times over. And Metallica's 72 Seasons is just that. It's just bullshit. There was a reason they hadn't released an album in 7 years, and it's because they're out of ideas, so they just resorted to sticking with the same formula that's frankly become boring. Number 2. Speaking of another band that should just become a legacy band, Avenged Sevenfold, this also applies to you. Because their new album, Life Is But a Dream, is all over the place. At least that is the thing I will give them over the Metallica album, is that this album has no cohesive sound. And I commend the boys at A7X for wanting to do different things and go in different directions they've never gone in before, but why do you have a song on here that is more Tame Impala leaning than Tame Impala?
What the hell is even that?
I shouldn't be hearing that on an Avenged Sevenfold album. It was like they basically pulled everybody together in the band and were like, alright, what idea do you have? What idea do you have? What idea do you have? And instead of going, oh, let's find a way to mix that in with our sound, they're like, alright, we'll just make all these songs based off of this. And it's just like, no, that's not the way to go about it. And the fact now that they're even saying, we don't want to make albums anymore. They look like they're going to take the Falling in Reverse route and kind of release singles. Since this album has come out, they've released a boatload of them. But, this is another album 7 years in the making that I just look at and go, why does it exist? If you truly didn't feel comfortable with it, then why is it out here? I would have been okay if you would have just released a single or two as your comeback, and that would have been fine. You could have released a small EP for all I cared. But there was no reason a full length needed to be out when this thing just feels rushed and overproduced and you didn't even give a shit. You just wanted to get something out there for people to hear. And, Avenged Sevenfold is one of those bands where when it comes to their earlier stuff, not a fan of, but once you start getting to 2005-ish, started becoming a fan, and I'm still a heavy defender of their 2013 album, Hail to the King. But now we're getting to consecutive albums where it's just kind of the same bullshit, and this time when they tried to experiment, it was just more of a let's just get an album out there rather than trying to make something good. And when you're a band, this far in your career and that seems to be your mentality, then it's time to just stop making new albums and just go and do the thing. Oh, we'll play live, we'll play the hits, and maybe we'll release a song or two here and there, but that's about it. And Avenged Sevenfold, hopefully that's where they're at now, because I will not be able to stand another album from them again, especially if it's like this one.
Got it!
Alright, so now there's one album this year that was the absolute worst of the worst, at least to me. However, we're not going to talk about that album yet, because before we get there, we have two dishonorable mentions that I need to talk about. These albums were bad, but they weren't bad enough to make the year-end list. Now, I will say, these two bands that I'm going to be talking about were not ones that I was a fan of. Like, I would listen to some of their songs and kind of tune into their albums, but, I was never into them per se, and there's reasons. But when I can tell that a band or artist album that I'm listening to is bad for their standard, even though I've barely heard anything from them, then you have messed up. And these are those two bands.
Dishonorable mention number 1.
Why can't you just please surrender? Surrender what you promised. Surrender what I need.
This was supposed to be Godsmack's last album, but apparently they're like, no, we redact that, we're still gonna make albums. So now the whole thing of making these songs atmospheric and supposed to be one big send-off, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, so now it's just another typical, Godsmack album in the discography that frankly doesn't really wow me in any way. It's like, oh, look, we went back to doing songs of our old sound and also doing, the new stuff that everybody loves, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, even if this was going to be your last album, it was not a great send-off. It was just kind of like, meh, very bland, and I still don't necessarily fully see the appeal of Godsmack after this album.
Dishonorable mention number 2.
Pierce the Veil is just one of those bands that I guess I was never into. I think it's the same problem I have with Sleeping with Sirens, is that I can't stand Vic Fuentes' voice. It's just too high-pitched and whiny for me to really take seriously most of the time. Although they do have enjoyable songs, I will say that. It's just not a band that I ever got into. But like Metallica and like Avenged Sevenfold, this was their first album in 7 years. And listening to it, I can kind of tell that it was going to be a disappointment to the fans. Just because, it feels like true fans who have waited 7 years for this album are going to hear this and be like, that was it? Really? Passa Nirvana is a good song because it gives us something different, but the rest of the songs are just kind of, I guess there's some other okay tracks on there, but a lot of the time I found myself zoning out because the songs weren't that as interesting to begin with. And this is something that Pierce the Veil always does. They take a long time in between albums, but I don't know. There seems something off about this album more than what I've heard about their other ones, and a lot of fans are agreeing, saying it's good, it's got good moments, but there's just something missing and it wasn't worth the 7-year wait. And even when someone who is a casual listener of them, knows that, then there's a problem.
Number 1.
Alright, the honorable mentions, or dishonorable mentions, are out of the way, which leads us to my number 1 pick for worst album of 2023. This was the first album by this band in 5 years, and the album they released 5 years ago I thought was absolutely dreadful, and I thought would be the end of them, but no, here they are, still going, still kicking, and heck, I even made a video about them on this channel this year after this album came out, stating that I was a fan for a long time, and their last album was really what did it for me, and I kind of just wanted to listen to this album to see what they had. Maybe there was something there, and boy was I wrong. 30 Seconds to Mars at this point shouldn't even be a legacy band. They just shouldn't even be a thing. I get Jared and Shannon Leto want to keep this thing going, but like, man, Jared Leto's just out of any sort of idea, anything interesting at all. And, I mean, he's just been on a roll with making shit lately. I mean, do we not remember Morbius? And I guess that failed so miserably that he's like, oh shit, I should probably, get back to 30 Seconds to Mars, and do that. And, I'm gonna say this right now before people freak out. I'm not asking 30 Seconds to Mars to go back to, their, early albums where they had that emo rock type feel, but at least give us something from like 2013's Love, Lust, Faith, and Dreams, where it felt like you still gave a shit and it still felt like this is a band that could still do something. I didn't even think it could get any worse than their last album, America, but somehow it did. Like, Stuck is an okay track, I guess. Like, it's listenable to me, but that's the most high intensity track on the album. The rest is just pop fodder with lyrics that are just like something that a 50-plus-year-old shouldn't be singing about. Like, oh, we're these kids in love, and I'm not sure if I love you. I don't know. It's tearing me apart. It's like, Jared, who is this for? Like, what are you doing? What is going through your head that you think this is actually good at all? This is actually sustainable. And it just blows my mind that they are still doing arena tours and stuff, because I thought people would just be tired of it. But no, they've clamored on to the, we're a pop band now and we're gonna continue through this, when it's just like, yeah, but I still want the quality of the music to be good, which now for 2 straight albums, it hasn't, and somehow it's gotten worse. Like, he's just so egotistical and up his own ass, that being Jared Leto, that he thinks any form of art that he does is good and people who judge it don't get it. It's like, I get it and I don't get it, but at the same point in time, I can still listen to music and be like, oh, this is bad. Even though it can be subjective, I have ears, I can fucking hear, and when I hear something I don't like, I'm okay with calling it out, because I know that him and Shannon can do so much better, but they are just choosing not to at this point. It's almost just like they're half-assing it because they know, hey, as long as we get that one hit song, people are still going to tune in every time we release an album, and to me, that's just the wrong way to do music.
It's Morbin time.
So I guess, congratulations 30 Seconds to Mars for being my worst album of 2023. Not necessarily a tag that you won, but you got it now, and you know what? I don't feel bad about it. Would really like to hear in the comments below what your least favorite album of 2023 was, and heck, maybe even give me your most disappointing album as well, because like I said, a lot of these albums were just more disappointing than they were bad, and it sucks that, I've had a lot of that over the past couple of years where I've been more disappointed, but you're going to get that with your favorite artists, especially ones that you've been anticipating during comebacks. That comeback was something that was either bad or maybe just not worth the wait at all. But until then, that's it for me. Stay safe out there, and I will see you all on Christmas Day.